Well, hello everyone. It is the 14th biannual The Ed Collab gathering. I'm Chris Lehman, founding director of the Educator Collaborative, and we are so honored and happy to have you here joining us today, or sometime in the future for our Ed Collab gathering, a gathering of educators throughout the world to come together to learn together as one community. I'm broadcasting live from my living room, and my son's 11th birthday, happy birthday sign. You can see part of it behind me. Just one point of personal privilege. My grandmother turns 95 tomorrow, so happy birthday, Grandma Norma. Before we get started here, one thing I'd like to begin with is first to say Shana Tova to our celebrating Edu friends, and also to share a personal apology. So today is the Jewish New Year, and we are hosting our gathering on the day of the Jewish New Year, which just shows my own limits to my personal understanding of the calendar. We plan our day far in advance, and we work with speakers and look at our own schedules to try to figure out when to host a day like today. And normally we also have several months of clear heads before a gathering comes up to perhaps catch something like this and fix it. But with everything, just all of this all going on, we truly didn't catch our error until maybe a week or so ago, when we actually looked at the calendar and turned it over. I take full responsibility. This day only happens because of the volunteer work of everyone who's presenting and the entire tech team who gives their time to make today happen. But the actual deciding this is the day we're going to do it, we work with others, we figure things out, but ultimately it falls on me. So I know that when you know better, you do better. And so my apologies to our friends who are celebrating today that may be missing today and are watching this in the future. Several of you have reached out, and thank you for the heads up. We know that the Ed Collab and the gathering means so much to you, and we know that you're reaching out to us because you want to make sure that we do better as well. So Shana Tova, have a blessed new year, and my deepest apologies for messing up today. From now on, I promise you this won't happen again. Other terrible things might happen. We might make other mistakes, but this is one thing that we'll keep in mind. So enjoy your holiday, and we hope that you're seeing us in a recording sometime soon. If you're new to the Ed Collab gathering, or if you've been here before, here's how the day works. First of all, you never registered because you never have to. This day is always our free gift to the educator community. So thank you for joining us. All you have to do is come to the website, which you're likely on now, or perhaps you're watching this from our at the Ed Collab Twitter handle, where a lot of the sessions will be pushed out today, or maybe you're watching it from our YouTube channel. Those are all places where you can find today's sessions. If you're watching from our website, all you have to do is go to the website and hover over any of the sessions, or you can even click over on the agenda to see the times and different options. From there, you'll just click on the session you'd like to watch, and you'll be taken right to the session page. So for example, if you're planning to watch Evan and Shauna's session right after our keynote, you just click over to session 1, click on their site, and boop, and there will be a video right there that will play for you. If everything's going the way that we hope it does, and we have had tech gremlins in the past that have shown up and not behaved the way that they should, but if everything's going the way that it should, then right there on the page, you should see the video. The video should start on time. If something happens, like the video's missing or it's gone, the best thing for you to do is refresh the page, and also check our Twitter handle at the Ed Collab, because we'll put announcements there. I myself have broken links before, and our incredible volunteer tech team has gone on Twitter to say, oops, session's down, it'll come up in a little bit. And all of you watching have been so wonderful with that as well, too. So everything should work as planned. If not, just check out our Twitter handle. That's where all the announcements from the day will go. One thing to know is this is only the second time in our history of 14 of these that almost the entire day is pre-recorded. Normally, our entire day is live, But with the COVID pandemic going on and knowing that no one knows what their life will be like, no one knows what might be happening with their families or themselves, along with all of the other stress that's happening with everything else going on in the world, we wanted to make sure that our presenters and tech team had time to prepare for today and didn't feel forced into being here live today. We're hoping that at that glorious day when COVID-19 is behind us and we have a handle on our public health, we can once again have a live day. But today, almost all the sessions are pre-recorded. That means that you will be tweeting to and talking to people who are probably following along during their live session, but might be following along at other times too. So what we'd like to suggest is today, if you're tweeting about a session, please use the hashtag the EdCollab Gathering. That's the best way to reach out to everyone. Our Twitter page will be pushing out lots of things that you're sharing today as well. But we'd also ask you to tag the presenters. That way it pops up right on their feed. They can see that you're talking about them, or perhaps you have questions for them, or just some comments, or even a shout out you'd like to give. Whenever possible, we've added their Twitter handle or other ways of tagging them right into their bios, right on the page. So just scroll down and that's where you can find them there. So the EdCollab Gathering is always totally free. And so what we have done since the beginning is to ask you to pay the joy forward, to think about what might you be paying for a session like today if you were attending a conference, or if you were going out for a cup of coffee in between sessions, or maybe having lunch with your friends. What might you normally be spending, even if it's just a couple of bucks for a bagel? What would you normally be spending at a day like today? And to consider taking that and instead of sharing it with us, sharing it with some charities. And so every EdCollab gathering, we invite our keynote, our opening and closing keynote, to adopt a charity for us. And if you go to gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com/charity, or you can find the charities and then click on adopted charity right on our main page. From there, you'll be taken to today's adopted charities. On that page are direct links to each of those charities' donation pages. You go straight to their sites and you can handle your donations there. So Sadia, our opening keynote, has adopted First Book. Since 1992, First Book has distributed more than 185 million books and education resources and programs to schools serving children from low-income communities in more than 30 countries. Our closing keynote is a discussion between Tiffany Jackson and Julia Torres, and they have decided to adopt Books Through Bars. It's based in Philadelphia, and Books Through Bars is a volunteer-run organization that distributes free books and educational materials to incarcerated people across multiple states. Each week, they receive hundreds of letters from prisoners requesting books, and each year they send over 8,000 book packages. So if you'd like to donate to First Book and Books Through Bars, or you have another way that you'd like to pay the joy forward, perhaps paying to another charity of your choice, volunteering your time, or reaching out to someone that you know needs some support, even just some emotional friendship, human support, if a monetary donation isn't an option for you today, whatever it is, across today's gathering, if you have a moment where you're like, wow, I feel so energized by this, and you want to pay that feeling forward, we invite you to go to our charity page and make a donation and pay that love forward. So I have to be honest with you. Last April, in the midst of the pandemic during our spring gathering, I was in pajamas still. This time I have an actual work shirt on. I feel a little bit more professional. But what I've done this time is what so many of you have continued to talk about throughout all of this, is I also have screwed up my to-do list. I have had to let some things go. And actually talking with Sadia and Jessica this morning before we got started for this session, Sadia said, yeah, this is a time where we have to give ourselves grace. And that is exactly what I would like to model for you, because I had to give myself some grace too. There's supposed to be a pre-session right now, right on the agenda, or you can see it up top. If you were to click on pre-session, there's supposed to be a pre-session of me talking about ways that you can learn with the EdCollab this year. There's not, because I didn't get to it yet, because I've been overwhelmed too. So At some point today, I will be recording that pre-session and placing it there. But here's just a few things that will be coming in that pre-session. So first of all, our study series. Each year, our study series is a way that you can learn with colleagues here at the Ed Collab. And generally, it's 12 live sessions across the year. It happens at Wednesdays across the year. You tune in live or you watch on demand to learn across multiple sessions. This year, you will be able to learn with our incredible colleagues at the Ed Collab. This year, there are multiple sessions, but because of everything, because of trust everything, we're changing the format. This year, our study series will be a series of hopefully up to 24, but if something happens somewhere around 24, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but close to 24 30-minute how-tos on a vast variety of questions and concepts and ideas that we all are struggling with right now. Right now, all of us continue to be in some form of emergency teaching. Right now, we're in some way trying to figure out how to make all of this work. Here at the Ed Collab, our group of colleagues are made up of currently practicing educators, administrators, literacy coaches, and other literacy leaders that are all doing all of this right now. None of us have the right answer, but we have some things that we've been learning along the way. And so these 30-minute how-tos will all be pre-recorded. We will start offering them beginning in October and populate our website as they come in. Our colleagues are putting them together right now. And so you'll be able to, within fall by winter, have access to all of them to watch at any time that you'd like. We've kept them short, we've kept them purposeful and inspirational as always. I also want to shout out my colleague, Dr. Dana Stakowiak, who'll be offering a session that she is generously giving her time for. It will happen the third Thursday of every month starting in October. We have more information on that coming. And it's called Reach Mindfulness, Radical Equity and Collective Healing. She's doing another version of this through her university where she's a professor. And this is one she'd like to do for us and all of you as educators. It will be about 45-minute to an hour mindfulness sits and social justice conversation. You can come and go as you'd like. You can attend when you'd like to. But every third Thursday, those will be out as a time to sit and think and hold on to your space and your mind. And lastly, all of my colleagues and I are available for working with you, your colleagues, your schools, your districts across this year. So in just a few minutes before I introduce our opening keynote, I'd like us to have a quiet moment for a moment. A quiet moment for a moment. Good job, Chris. Dr. Tracy Flores is a member of the Ed Collab, a colleague, friend, a professor I think you're now in Texas, or maybe you're in Arizona. I just screwed up your school. She's a professor. And Tracy Flores, whenever I've seen her anywhere, when she's leading a meeting, when she's presenting, one thing that she always says, one thing she always starts the work with is a moment to remember our ancestors. She always says, we have to remember and bring into this room our ancestors, the people who have come before us, who have made our time possible, who've made our learning possible, who've made our lives possible, who have brought us to the place where we are now. And so what I'd like us to do is to think about the people who are our ancestors and over the course of these last many months have also become our ancestors. People who have walked along with us and are no longer here, but whose gifts, whose memory, whose knowledge, whose fight have made it possible for us to be here. One of those ancestors we just lost, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A lot of us spent last night trying to figure out what does the world look like now without her leadership and her fight. What I'd like to invite you to do, and Sadi, I'll be with you in just a moment, I promise. What I'd like you to do is to join me in just a quiet moment of holding in your minds someone, or maybe someones, who are ancestors now. They could be people that you've lost recently. They could be ones that you've held on to through time. They could be folks that are public. They could be ones that are private to your family. But if you could join me again in just a moment to bring them into this space with us, to honor these people in the way that I've learned from Dr. Tracy Flores. So just join me in a quiet moment of reflection. Over the course of the news last night, people began talking that knew Ruth Bader Ginsburg best, people that had worked closely with her, had been colleagues over time. And one thing that they said is she fought and she wants us to fight too. So as you're thinking about those people that are your ancestors, that are our ancestors, one thing you can do with their memory is to think, what have they done that you're going to carry forward? What fight have they fought that you will continue on their behalf? What gifts have they given? What love have they given? What have they cared for that you will carry forward too? Thank you for spending that moment with us, and I can feel that energy around us. So now it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our opening keynote, Sadia Faruqi. Sadia Faruqi is the author of many texts, including several that we have here in our house and I share with teachers all the time, the Yasmin series. This one, for example, Yasmin in Charge, all of them are delightful and incredible, and Sadia, I'm just so in love with her, with everything you've done with her. In this particular one, I've been sharing with teachers across this summer in our online work. Yasmin in Charge, early on in the book, Yasmin is asked to help keep an eye on the class while her teacher walks out. So Yasmin very diligently attempts to do that. And as she is attempting to do that, of course, what happens is the class goes into total chaos. Teachers and I really enjoyed it and laughed quite a lot about, yes, all of the total chaos that we seem to be living in all of the time. So it is with great pleasure and just a thankful heart to invite you here this morning. Thank you, Sadia, for being a part of our gathering, and I'm looking forward to your session.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. This actually happened to my daughter. A lot of the Yasmin books are actually inspired from things that have happened to my kids, or at least partly the beginning, and then I come up with the story myself. But when she was in 2nd or 3rd grade, her teacher left her in charge because she had to step out for a few minutes, and she came home crying, saying, no one was listening to me, and no one did what I told them, and I'm a horrible teacher. And I was like, you're a kid, you're not a teacher.
Right, exactly.
But that led to Yasmin, the teacher.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I will now share that with everyone. Thank you. Thanks to your daughter.
A lot of people do say that would never happen, but yeah, it's rare, but it did happen to my kid. And my kids are not happy with the fact that I'm always using them as fodder for my books. So, that's a different story. But I am so grateful to be invited here today. I've listened and kind of like peeked into a lot of previous keynotes. So this is kind of like big moment for me to be following a lot of great authors that I and other educators that I look up to and am inspired by. So I will do my best to inspire you today. Obviously, always delighted to be speaking to a group of educators. My mother is and has always been an educator, starting from being a teacher to a principal, to a teacher's trainer and a teacher's trainer college principal. And I kind of always was with her, spent a lot of time hanging out in her office and meeting with her students. She would sometimes bring me in and my siblings to monitor testing and things like that, because we all pitched in a lot of times. So it's always a pleasure. I feel like I'm surrounded by family, even though it is virtual when I'm meeting with educators. So thank you for giving me this platform today. Today's topic is that I'm going to talk about is building bridges through cultures. And, I do that through my books, through my writing, through my speaking. Um, but I think that you all do that every day through the work that you do as well. Teaching students, reading books, being open to new ideas and new kinds of writings that are out there. Um, Educating, things like that. I think that we all do our part in building bridges. I just do it through storytelling, and that's what I'm going to be doing today, telling you my story and why it's something, or how it's something that I came um, to be so interested in this concept of bridge building, and why, even though it's a very big kind of concept, building a bridge, I don't know, what does that even mean? I'll tell you what that means. Um, I'm going to talk about my background and my history and my life. Uh, what were some of the experiences that led to today, me sitting in front of a computer screen talking to all of you? All the things that go behind it. Chris mentioned ancestors, and there's definitely one very important part of my life, an ancestor, I guess you could say, who I'm going to talk to you about. But hopefully in all of this, when I tell you my story and my perspective, you will find some inspiration, some motivation, some thing that you can take back to not only your classrooms, but your life in general, and continue this desire that I have, and I know you have, to build bridges across different kinds of people, different backgrounds. So that's what I'm gonna kind of do today. Let me see if I'm going to share my slides, and let's see if that works. Yes, it does. Okay, so I'm hoping that y'all can see that. I'm gonna assume, unless somebody sends me a message, I think it's working. Okay, great. So that's what I'm gonna talk to you about today. But let me just start. I know that Chris already introduced Yasmin in Charge, and maybe some of you already know this little girl, this character that I've created, Yasmin. Yasmin was created because I needed her in my life. My daughter was at that time in kindergarten. She wasn't reading, not because she wasn't a good reader, but because she wasn't interested in what was out there. There were no kids like her. And she really felt that in the early reader series that I would bring for her, and hope that she would get further in her reading. And she would get frustrated. And I thought that if I had a book about a girl who was like my girl, who with a family who was like my family, a mama who was like me, who wears a hijab, and a first generation or an immigrant family, maybe it will help my daughter relate more to what she was reading. And so that was like my little bridge that I built between her and her reading. And it kind of grew and grew. Yasmin is now, there are 12 books in the series. The ones that you see on the screen, Yasmin in Charge and Meet Yasmin, and You Can Do It, which is this year's, are all collections of 4 books, but you can get them as individual titles. And there's a lot of back matter at the back, which really does discussion and helps kids not just learn about the story, but about themselves and how can they do better. So I just love it. And I hope that if you haven't looked at it yet, you will, just because there's so much content in there for you to kind of take back to your work. I also have 2 middle grade novels this year, which has been stressing me out because having 2 books and big books like middle grade novels come out this year in 1 year is kind of hectic. A Place at the Table is a book I've co-written with my Jewish friend Laura Chauvin. She's also a middle grade author. And we wrote a story about a Muslim girl and a Jewish girl who are in a cooking club together, and nobody in the world expects or even wants them to get along because we have a history background of just unfortunately no bridges. I'm going to talk a lot about bridges today, I guess. A lack of bridges between certain communities, and these 2 girls don't really care about that, but there's it's a friendship story. And 1,000 Questions, which is I'm super excited about, which is going to come out next month. in the US, and then the month after that in the UK. It is 1,000 questions, which is set in my hometown of Pakistan, which is where I grew up, and I'll talk about that just a little bit later. A first generation story of an American Pakistani girl who goes to visit her grandparents, and she gets to see where she came from for the first time, where her parents and her grandparents and her ancestors are from. And for her, that becomes, in the story, a bridge for her to connect to her own heritage. So I hope that you will check them out, not because they are my books, but because I believe that they are books that will be helpful to you in the topic that I'm going to talk about today. So if I was in a, before pre-pandemic times, if I was doing a class visit and I was speaking to kids and I would tell them I am a Pakistani American author, I grew up in Pakistan, and then I would ask kids, do you know where Pakistan is? And my experience has been that most kids and adults really don't know, or they think they know, but they're wrong. So that's why I like to have a little map. Pakistan is a small country in Asia. It's not in the Middle East. It's not, where we often think it is. It is on one side, it's got India. On the other side, it's got Afghanistan and Iran. What you can't see on that slide is that on the north, there's China. And so it's a tiny place that's enveloped or surrounded by huge kind of geopolitical powers in a lot of ways. And it was a great place for me to grow up. I was born and grew up in Karachi, which is right at the tip that you can see near the Arabian Sea, which is kind of like the New York of Pakistan. It was the place to be. I was a big city girl, grew up in a lot of places, grew up in a lot of among a lot of people. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Pakistan and why I think that that's important, just really quickly. So Pakistan was originally part of India, and that whole subcontinent was ruled by the British, as much of the world was. Around the 1800s, 1850, 758, all the way up to 1947, when the British left and they broke up. Before they're leaving, their last act of, insaneness was that they broke up this country into two countries, India and Pakistan, and which in a rip, that's kind of caused this trauma to both our countries and the generations like me who weren't alive at then, but we still have it in our hearts, which we call the partition. And why do I talk about this? Who cares? Especially if many of you are from the US or any other place except this area of the world. Why is it even relevant? I believe that we all have a history. We all have things that make us who we are. And it's not just us, but it's our previous generations. It's our ancestors, like we were talking about this morning, but also how we behave and how we act and what we feel. There's a lot of it that is from our past, from the past of our families and our histories and our nations, wherever you live. So for me, that's part of, all the baggage that I come with, because, for example, my grandparents went through the immense trauma of partition where millions were killed. And it was just a horrible time, which I'm going to write about someday. But I heard those stories, right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that storytelling later. But in 1947, Pakistan was created, and I obviously was born a lot later than that. My mom was, I believe, a year old when that event happened. I grew up in Karachi. Karachi is like this cosmopolitan city, very cool, very amazing, with all the problems and fun aspects that both come with big city living. But it's also a juxtaposition of, old and new. There's a lot of British era buildings, as there are in most of Pakistan, but there are also modern things and malls and big buildings and things like that. And I grew up in there. I lived there pretty much all my life. It's a very, very important part of who I am. It's an important part of who I am because it's informed how I've lived, what are the experiences I've had, men negative and positive, and I bring that to my writing. Not only when I'm writing about, Karachi, for example, in 1,000 Questions, my upcoming book, but just generally how I think about life and what I think about people. Karachi was this place which was the financial center, and so it was a magnet to people from all over the country. And so it was a mix of all the different ethnic groups that live in Pakistan who would come here for work. It was I studied in a convent run by Catholic nuns. All of that informed me, and all of that really, without me realizing at that young age, obviously, now I can think back and say, yeah, those are things that helped me shape who I am. But all of that put in me this need for bridge building, this need to connect with other people, this need to say, I may be very different from you, but we're living together for better or for worse in this place. At that time, it was a city. Now it's a different place, but this world in general, and saying, how can I do my little part in making that better and making that connection and making that communication, and not just being, on different sides of, say, a lake or a mountain or something without a bridge. So now I can appreciate that. I didn't when I was, a teenager. That's me when I was really young. I like to have this picture. I show this to all my kiddos when I go to do school visits or library visits. I was around 7 or 8 at this time. And this is the time when I really started becoming interested in being a writer. And I like to have, that's my grandma's house. Obviously, I'm young. I'm no clue what, 40-some-year-old Sadia is going to be doing. But I used to have these little notebooks, and I would write down my thoughts and my ideas in them very, very, very regularly, and stories and poems and all kinds of things. So I like to have this picture for myself and for kids and for adults to see that there's no age. Any age is a good age to decide that you want to do something, whether it's being a writer or being an educator or anything. I love this picture because it just, I'm reminded of all my dreams and hopes for my life. So when I feel down, I'm like, this girl is still there. I'm there, and I need to kind of get back on that horse. There are 2 things that really helped shape me as a storyteller and a bridge builder at this age and forward. So I'm going to share those with you. I don't know if any of you have been to or live in currently cities like Karachi or places like South Asia. There's a huge market for books, but they're not, the nice new kind of books. There's a huge market for used books. There's a huge, both in the English and the language of that place. I grew up with these street bazaars. A lot of times books would be on the street, or they would be piled high on these carts, and my dad would take me to, one of those where they were very cheap because they were usually older and used, and he would let me buy whatever I wanted. But it was fun because I also never knew what I would get. They weren't always my choice. They were never my choice, honestly. Science, history, space, encyclopedias, everything, but also storybooks. A lot of Westerns. I don't know what it was. Very, very weird, but I read a lot of Westerns. But this was something that really inculcated a love of reading. And because those books were from all over the world, I kind of just organically developed this understanding and affinity for places that were different from where I was growing up. So, for you, maybe me living in Pakistan is strange or unusual or something else, but for me, that was my life. And for me, reading about a kid in New York or a kid in Texas or a kid in the UK, that was weird. That was unusual. That was a different culture for me. And so when I was reading all these books, I was gaining this understanding that, oh, this is how other people do things. And it's fun too. And it's interesting too. So that was one big part of, I believe, what made me today. The other part is when we were talking about ancestors, I was kind of choking up when Chris was saying that, because this is probably the most important ancestor for me. This is my grandmother. This is a picture that's quite old. I think that, you know, she was maybe in her 60s. I don't remember, 50s or 60s at that time. In this picture, she died a couple of years ago, and she was very old. She was 90 almost by the time that she passed away. I spent all my time with her. She was my babysitter. My grandparents lived with us in our house. And so she was the one who took care of me and my siblings while my parents were working. And she was the most amazing and biggest storyteller in the world. I grew up on her stories, and her stories were pretty gruesome most of the time because, like I said, she had gone through the event, the big catastrophe for us as South Asians of partition. And then after that, she had settled in what at that time was a country called East Pakistan. Pakistan had been divided into West and East. And then in 1972 or 73, that country broke off and became Bangladesh. And so she had to move from there to what is now Pakistan. And so she went through those two immense wars. I grew up hearing those stories of, oh my gosh, just, you know, soldiers running after them and killing on the street. And I don't know why she was telling these stories to a kid, but I get that, you know, that was her way of passing on what was in her heart to the next generation. And probably was also, you know, talk therapy for her. Going over it again and again was probably helpful to her. But I was a kid and I would just be fascinated listening to these stories. Not only those, there were stories of her childhood. She grew up very poor and struggling. So, you know, the stories of her walking to school bare feet and having, you know, the soles of her feet bleeding and not being able to finish school and feeling the hunger. She shared all that with me. They were my bedtime stories. And when I was getting bored and when I was missing my mom who was working, she'd be like, come, I'll tell you a story. There were also fantastic stories like, you know, big weddings with elephants and henna parties and things like that. So storytelling is in my blood, all thanks to this wonderful woman. And it was also learning about, at the same time, about something was very different from my experience, right? She was talking about a country that no longer existed. She was talking about a culture that had died away because it was so long ago, about a way of life that was different from mine. She spoke a different language than me, even though she was also speaking Urdu, which was my language, but so even within that storytelling, that was this learning from my end about a different culture and a different way of doing things. And I appreciate that so much, but not at that time. I was just a kid listening to grandma telling stories. So I'm going to stop this. Okay. So now fast forward, you know, those things happened and I am now, I grew up, I moved to the US and that was, and I became an immigrant, which is a word which has a lot of baggage politically, but it's also for an immigrant, what that means is so complicated. I moved to the US just before 9/11. So my entire life in the US has been living as a Muslim American woman wearing a hijab in a post 9/11 world, which is a huge, you know, it just comes with so much in that. And if you're not aware of those things, that's one of the reasons why we need to build bridges and talk about these things, because a lot of times people living right next to us, our neighbors or the kids in our class or anyone that we might know have been going through things that we are clueless about. And that's part of why I believe that the work that I do and the work that you do is so important. But, you know, living in a post 9/11 world and coming to the US as a early, it was, you know, 20 something, very early 20s. I remember a lot of interesting things. I mean, culture shock, yes. But thankfully, because of the books I'd been reading all my life as a kid, it wasn't that strange. Very few things were shocking to me because I was like, oh yeah, I read about that in Babysitter's Club, or I read about that in some other book that I read when I was a kid. But I remember standing in front of the mirror and practicing my accent, trying to get rid of what I thought was an accent that would harm me when I went to work or tried to find a job or did anything that I wanted to do in this country, worrying about my dress and my looks and my skin color and all those things. Now I'm more comfortable in my skin. I've lived here long enough to say, doesn't matter. I am who I am. I have, value to bring. But when you are a new immigrant, you don't have that. And the reason I'm saying all this is because you as educators, I want you to think about that. What does it mean to be an immigrant? And what do you think happens to a person when they become an immigrant? Because you probably deal with a lot of immigrants, right? You might have you might have other teachers, other educators, other people in your workplace. You might have students who either are immigrants or refugees themselves, or they have family members, or they are the first generation and they've gone through that experience of having ancestors who are from somewhere else and everything that comes with it. So that's why I think that it's not just my story that I'm telling you. That's why I think that it's a valuable thing for you as educators to think very carefully about what that means to the people, for the people that you are interacting with on a daily basis. How does that person's life change if they have left everything and they have moved? A lot of people move their families, a lot of people don't. I came very alone. I left everybody that I knew, in Pakistan, and I came here. So everyone's circumstances are different, but you're not going to know how it affects them until you kind of ask and think about it and explore it yourself and with other people. Right now, I would say that it's kind of a milestone for me because literally half of my life is now, I'm kind of like, half of my life has been spent in one country and half in the other. I'm right at that middle point, which is interesting. I like to think of it as being neither here nor there. I don't know. It's very strange and surreal, but definitely it's confusing a lot of times. Questions like, where do I really belong? Do I belong to the place that I grew up in and that has all my formative years? That psychologists say that a person's personality and everything that brain development happens in the first few years, and so that's from a very different place than now. What have I accomplished? Things like that. But then that people that you're working with that have gone through similar experiences are probably experiencing and thinking the same things. And unless you build that bridge with them, you're not going to know, you're not going to really be equipped to handle that. And, you could say, what is it to me? I don't really care. But I believe that, both you and I, whether we're storytellers or we're educators, we do have a certain responsibility for the people that we are, in charge of, that we're working with, that we're teaching, that we're helping, to know what is in their hearts so that we can be there with them in that journey of theirs. Let me see if I can go back to this. Okay, well, it took me back to the first slide, so we'll just, yes. So I'm learning this technology, so as we all are. So I guess what I am today, after all those experiences and those ancestors, and then living here in the US and trying to make something of myself, there's so much that goes into it, and you can see all those little things. I'm always first and foremost an interfaith activist, which is kind of like a different name for a bridge builder. Storyteller, writing friends, but being a mom, raising first generation kids is a very big part of that, and that's a topic for another speech, but all of that comes into it. But what I really see myself as is building bridges, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what that means and how you can implement that as well in your life. When I talk first, even in my own mind about building a bridge, it's strange and it's funny, but what comes to my mind, honestly, is this movie that I used to watch with my dad when I was a kid. It was, you might know of it, maybe it's very old. It's called Bridge on the River Kauai. 1957 or 58 or late 1950s is when it was made, and it was based on a novel. It was a film about these British POWs, prisoners of war, during World War II, and they have been captured by the Japanese, and they are being held in a camp. And the camp, I believe, was in what at that time was Burma, and they have been tasked to build this bridge across this river. The River Kauai, and they have no tools, they have no resources, they don't want to do it because they're prisoners. Obviously, they're being forced to. And what they don't know, what you know as watching that movie, is that they're building the bridge, with all these challenges and difficulties that go with it. But then they don't know that the Allies are actually aware of the plans, and the Allies are coming to destroy that bridge. So obviously, that's a memory I have of a simpler time when I would watch movies with my father. But then now, when I'm thinking of the concept of bridge building, I really often think about this image in my mind. And these people, when you're building a bridge, you're doing the best. But oftentimes you don't have the tools, you don't have the resources, you have an intention, but you're not really sure how to go about it. Sometimes you may actually not want to do that thing, make that interaction or communication, but circumstances or people are forcing you. And then a lot of times there are other forces that are trying to destroy your efforts. So kind of like an analogy of this movie, which was, oh my gosh, I can't even remember how it ended. It was not good. It was a war movie, so you can imagine. But hold on. Okay. So I guess that when I got serious about doing this kind of work, I had to really think to myself how I wanted to go about it, knowing that there would be all these challenges that I talked about, lack of resources, not knowing what I'm doing, not wanting, being with a group that may not always want to have that bridge built. What could I do? And for me, the answer was writing. For me, the answer was storytelling, because that's what I grew up with, like I said, with my grandma, with my history of just reading constantly. I realized that is what I wanted. That is how I wanted my bridge building to work. Obviously, I connected first and foremost with the stories that my grandmother was telling me. And, a child spending so much time with her grandmother, it's not always easy communication. There's a bridge to be built there too. And that's why we talk about this concept called the generation gap, which obviously happens for a lot of reasons. But for me, definitely it was like, man, I have to be in the company of this old lady all the time. And I would rather not, but I don't have a choice. That's how my life was. But for her and for me, those stories became that bridge. And so when I grew up and today, I really, really feel strongly that stories can have that power to bring people together, to connect us. And it can be totally fiction, or it can be real stories, like my grandmother used to tell me. It doesn't really matter. I also found that another way, because in the early years after 9/11, I would do a lot of interfaith work, and I still do, but it was more urgent, obviously, say 10, 20 years ago. And when I would talk about, what my religion taught, or try to justify, not justify, but try to talk about the fact that, I as a Muslim didn't believe in violence, and if somebody was doing something negative, it was not something that they were following that I believed in, et cetera, a lot of things. when I said things like that, I realized that people would stop listening after a while because it's all facts and statistics and it's boring and it's dry and you can look up Google and get that information. But when I would talk about myself or my family or my kids or growing up in Pakistan and anything real in the form of a story, I realized that the impact was very different. I saw people who were my audience, wherever I was doing that training or that address, I saw them, be interested and ask questions and say, oh, well, and then becomes the point of the connection. Yeah, I also had a grandmother who used to tell me stories, or I also went through this war, or, anything that we tell in a story form, it becomes a connection. And why is that? That is because we build empathy to that. Empathy is such a powerful word. It's like this little word that, we don't like to use because half of us half the time don't know what it really means, especially if we're kids. But it's such a powerful word. And I believe very strongly that storytelling really, really helps us develop empathy. Whether it's a fantastical story about dragons or monsters, there's always kernels of truth in it. There's always something that we can identify to that story, that we can relate to, that we can think of, oh, this is so different, but I get that. That's how I was feeling at this time as well. So empathy is what builds the bridge. If I'm talking about bridge building and you're saying, yeah, but that's just an idea, that's just a concept, who cares, or how can I do that? That's how you do that. The bridge itself is the empathy, right? You have a person on one side and you have a person on the other side, and in between is, I don't know, the river Kwai, whatever. And through that story, you can build that connection. And that's how you do it. And you can do it, through any kind of storytelling. You don't have to do it through storytelling, but that's how I do it. You can do it through so many other things, by learning about each other, by sharing, ideas, by knowing how they're feeling and listening to them. Let me see if I can go back. The more I do it, the better I'll get at it, right? Yes. So I don't know if you know this gentleman. His name is Mohsin Hamid. He is a fantastic and very famous Pakistani writer. His latest book, I believe, is Exit West, which won a whole bunch of awards. He wins awards a lot, and he's very proficient. And he's from Pakistan, so I get to, have my little moment of glory with him. He said this once that I really, really echoed with me. Empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. That is just, if you just sit and think about that for just a second, that is very true, but it's also the crux of storytelling, right? Being entertained by a movie or a book or somebody telling you a story sitting in front of you, that entertainment is only part of the fascination that you would have. That aside from that, being entertained or being, riveted, or being horrified, which is also a form of entertainment, what you're really looking for is establishing that connection, that empathy with another person, or with that story, or with the characters of that story. So I see the power in that every single day. I see the power of that when I get messages from people who've read my book, from kids who, the other day, somebody sent me this email, and he had a picture. A lot of times kids will send me pictures holding up my books, and then they want to send that to me, which is awesome. And he was this white boy, about 7 or 8, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and he had made his mom write, "I love Yasmin, she's just like me." And I was blown away. I love that. I love that because this little boy could not be any more different from Yasmin if he tried. But he felt that when he read these books, he felt that they were the same, which is what empathy is all about, which is what, there's that bridge right there, and that bridge will never be broken or destroyed because he got that connection. He'll be able to see other people and all his life with an empathetic lens because of that connection. Lala, we all know her. She's awesome. She's also from Pakistan. She said, I truly believe the only way we can create global peace is through not only educating our minds, but our hearts and our souls. You know, this is something that's like really important for us in all our work we do, right? As educators, and she actually used the word educating in her little quote. But you as educators, you do that first part. I know you do, right? You're educating the minds of your students, obviously, every day in whatever capacity that your work is. And that's important to you, and that's essential to you, even before it was, but now with the pandemic, it's become even more essential, I know, for you all to be keeping that foremost in our minds, and how with all the challenges, we still have to keep that goal and that mission foremost in our lives of educating kids' minds. But then you're also doing, and I urge you, if you're not thinking of it that way, but you probably are, also educating, like Malala said, the hearts and souls of those students. How are you doing that every day? And if you're not, you know, maybe start, but I know that you are, listening to them, learning about them, talking to them, sharing your own experiences with them. That bridge building can't be one-sided, right? Getting a hold of books that you know that some child will enjoy. So many times I get messages from teachers who say, I know the exact kid who I need to give this book to. Knowing that is part of, you know, your work as bridge builders. And I hope that you will take it seriously, because not only are you doing the educating physically part of it, but also emotionally part of it. Yeah, so she's wise. She's very young, but she's very wise. So in the end, I'm going to give you a couple of examples from my storytelling and how I use them, from these examples as a bridge. And then you can take that and you can use any kind of, any format, any book, any format of storytelling, and use that as a bridge. So this is actually one of the spreads from Yasmin the Explorer. Yasmin the Explorer was actually the first Yasmin book I ever wrote, and literally as a reaction to the needs that my own daughter had expressed. You know, obviously it came out a little bit later than when I wrote it, but this was the final results. This is very early in the Yasmin books. And I'll read out just a little bit from it. So Baba and Yasmin are looking at their map that they've made, and Mama looks in and she says, Yasmin, I'm going to the farmer's market. Want to come with me? And Yasmin jumped up. Yes, it will be an exploration. She could hardly wait as Mama got her hijab and her purse. Now, that picture there that my wonderful illustrator Hatem has made of Mama putting on her hijab, that's a bridge builder all on its own. And you will see how pictures do the same thing. You know, it doesn't have to be words. So you can think of it as two ends of a bridge, like I said before. You know, on one side is a child who is part of the story, who identifies like my daughter, who would read this and go, oh yeah, this is so normal for me, right? Every time we go out, Mama will put on her hijab while I'm putting my shoes on. This is our everyday life. I know this. I have, you know, this is very relevant and very common and very real to me. On the other side of the say the river is another child for whom this is not normal, who doesn't have this experience, this life experience, for whatever reason. But right now I'm talking about this element of mama putting her hijab on as an example. But that child is going to read this, and it will be another thing that they could empathize with, right? They could see, yeah, my mama will put her makeup on before she goes out, or my mama will be looking for her keys or her purse, or that's how I sit in my dad's lap every night at bedtime and listen to a story. There's so many ways that we can kind of create that empathy, and so you will see a little bit of a bridge being created between two people whose life experience is very different, but they can relate in some way. And that's the value of then whatever sort of storytelling that you tell. This is a little excerpt from one of this year's books, A Place at the Table, that I talked about. So Place at the Table is the story of two girls, Sarah and Elizabeth. Sarah is Muslim and Elizabeth is Jewish. And in this scene, it's Thanksgiving and Elizabeth has been invited to come to Sarah's house. I enter a small hall lighted with a couple of warm lamps on a table. Sarah motions for me to put my shoes on a rack in the corner. I'm glad I'm wearing socks. There's a giant painting across from the doorway in Arabic script. Its bright colors remind me of the ketubah hanging in my parents' bedroom. So I won't read the rest of it just because I want to get to the end of my what I want to say. But so here's this girl who's never been inside a Muslim person's house. It's strange to her that she has to take her shoes off. It's strange to her that, things are different. But then she sees this painting in Arabic script, and even though it's Arabic, even though it's probably a lot of Muslims have, verses from our scripture as decoration and calligraphy, it's a part of our identity a lot of times, and you will see that in a lot of Muslims' homes. So for her, that's weird and strange and unusual. But instead of focusing on that, she's able in her mind to empathize because she immediately is reminded of something else, something that's very Jewish. Her ketubah is a marriage contract, and oftentimes you will have it out in a way that's a decoration piece as well, because it's so special. And she's able to build that bridge between herself and Sarah, because something that's very different reminds her of something else that's very different too, but they have the same specialness and they have the same feeling and they have the same look, even with the calligraphy. So there are just two examples of, you can find so many when you work with kids, with adults, with anybody that you want to build a bridge with. So I guess what comes next? I'm going to end by giving you, I know I'm like talking about a lot of stuff, but I don't want you to feel like that was all good and inspirational, but how do I actually change anything? So, like I said before, it is in your power as educators to change things, to build that bridge. But it's not easy because, like the movie, bridge building inherently has a lot of dangers and a lot of challenges that come with it. It's a lot of times from people who don't want that bridge to be built for whatever reason, and a lot of times it's internal, like in the movie, there were those prisoners who were building that bridge didn't really want to build that bridge. So if you go from that perspective into any exercise, and especially something in which you're trying to open up and try to build empathy, it's not going to work. You're kind of self-sabotaging. So knowing that all that is there, what can you do as educators, as storytellers, as just people who love kids and who love things? Talk, listen, ask questions, share your own experiences, share other people's experiences, give them the opportunity to talk to you, be caring, be supportive of people who are from other places, other countries, other cultures. If you have immigrant families in your circle, just be aware of everything that goes in to make that person standing there in front of you that day. Their immigrant story might have been 20 years ago like mine, but it's still, it's a very big part of who they are and what they bring to the table. So when you do all that and read a lot of books, I mean, definitely, focusing on books from other cultures, other countries, books about experiences that are different from yours is probably the most important way that you can build that bridge. And hopefully we all build our little bridges and we'll have a really nice place to, relax one day. All right. I'm handing it over to you, Chris. I went on too long, probably.
No, thank you, Sadia. It's the perfect start to our day today. Thank you so much for all that you shared with us. I mean, first and foremost, for the books that you're putting out into the world, but also for your work. Twitter's been bing, 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 pinging with
Nice.
the incredible tweets, incredible quotes that you've been sharing, and just thinking that one quote you shared about seeing yourself in someone else is empathy. I feel inspired. I know we all do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and have a great rest of your conference. And I'm always online if anyone wants to connect with me. So yeah, that's right there. That is spelled wrong. There are 2 A's, not 2 D's. So
I'm sorry. Oops. And that was me. Oops, right here.
That's okay.
There. Okay, that's good.
We
could edit it live.
Right there.
I'm glad you grabbed it. So yes, if you feel inspired by Sadia's work that you already know, or by her message this morning, a few things to do. Number one, please make sure that you're following her at Sadia Faruqi. You can also use her name as her website. You can go there as well to find her books, her events, and other ways of contacting her. Please do pay the joy forward. Again, Sadia adopted for us today first book. So please visit our charity page. And if you were inspired this morning, like I was, like so many of you have been tweeting that you have been, please do pay the joy forward there, or in any other way that you'd like. As Sadia said as well, thinking about your own community and the people within it, there may be ways that you want to pay this joy forward there as well. Coming up in just a few minutes on 3 different pages will be our first set of workshops in session number 1. All 3 of them will go live right at 11 if YouTube and everything is behaving the way that it's supposed to. So head over to those. If you jump between sessions, the very first round of them should be playing at the same time for everyone. So you'll be watching the same session, even though it's pre-recorded, all at the same time. So you can continue your conversations there. Please use hashtag the EdCollab Gathering and make sure that you tag the presenters. Again, you can find their Twitter handles down inside of their bio. And then at the end of all of the workshops today, please do come back for our closing. It'll be a conversation between Tiffany D. Jackson and Julia Torres. And we'll have some closing announcements, as well as announcing when the next EdCollab Gathering will be in the spring and who our speaker is. So you'll want to tune in for that. So we'll see you at the end of the day there. So thanks again to Sadia. Thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. Please enjoy this day. It's always, it's fun and exciting for us to put it on. We hope that you enjoy it as well too. Continue to use hashtag the EdCollab Gathering to reach out and talk as a community, and just enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.